Evidently, we men, also like all the existing units of the world, are formed and always consist of the same three independent forces, by means of which the process of reciprocal maintenance of everything existing proceeds, namely, of the following three independent world forces. The first of these forces constantly arises from the causes which proceed in the prime source itself, and from the pressure of the newly arisen, and issuing from it by momentum, flows out of that prime source. The second world force is what this first force becomes when, after having spent the momentum which it has received, it strives to reblend with the source of its arising, according to the fundamental world law called, the effects of a cause must always re-enter the cause. Both of these forces in the general process of reciprocally maintaining forces are entirely independent, and in their manifestations have always and in everything their own properties and particularities. The first of these two fundamental forces, namely, that one which, for compelling reasons, always manifests outside the source of its arising, must constantly involve, and the second one, on the contrary, striving to blend with the cause of its arising, must always and in everything evolve. Owing to the fact that the first of the mentioned three independent forces arises from vivifying actions proceeding in the very foundation of the cause of everything existing, and thus receives in its presence the germ of the possibility of manifesting vivifyingness, it may be considered as good, that is, as a factor for the actualizing of the backward flowing effects which in relation to this first force can and must be considered evil. Moreover, the first of these forces, which is manifested from inevitable and compelling causes arising in the prime source itself, can, from this point of view, be considered as passive. In the second, backward flowing force, because it must constantly resist in order to have the possibility of penetrating backward, or at least the possibility of withstanding the opposite flowing first passive force, which has received its momentum from the prime source causes, must be regarded as active. And as for the third independent world force, this force is nothing else but only the result of the clash everywhere and in everything of these two fundamental descending and ascending independent forces. Although this third independent force is only the result of both first fundamental forces, it is, nevertheless, the spiritualizing and reconciling source of every world formation. And it is the spiritualizing source of every world formation because it arises and must exist in them as a presence all the time while the given results exist, which arise from various unusual mutual resistances occurring between the said two fundamental forces flowing in entirely opposite directions. And so, my boy, it was in this sense and in this meaning that the words good and evil were first used by this unfortunate Macari Kronbergsion, thanks to the aforesaid Bulmarchano of his, and according to other data elucidated by me there on the spot, there was crystallized in me, both concerning Macari Kronbergsion himself and everything else, my own special opinion, entirely different from the one which the righteous dwellers of the holy planet expressed as a result of all their researches, which, although wise, were not direct. I repeat, although the idea of external good and evil first arose there thanks to the individuality of that Macari Kronbergsion, yet he was, in my opinion, not to blame for it having taken such a maleficent form. However it might have been, my boy, indeed, according to the detailed and impartial researches I made there on the spot concerning all this, The following then became very definitely clear to me. When this maleficent idea there gradually took on such a definite form and began to be for the psyche of your favorites what is called an actualizing factor for the crystallization in their common presences of data for the fantastic notion, namely, that outside of them there exist, as it were, objective sources of good and evil acting upon their essence. Then, from that time on, other peculiar data, at first spontaneously, and later through their strange consciousness, began to be crystallized in the general psyche of each of them, which data, owing to automatic being associations, engender the conviction that the causes of all their manifestations, both good and bad, are not they themselves personally, nor their own criminal essence egoism, but some or other external foreign influences not depending on them at all.